are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back to the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on all platforms and also subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. It's a Blu Monday, and that means I've got Larry Blustein joining me today to talk a little Miami Hurricanes football. Thanks for joining me today, Larry.
Oh, anytime, Marcus. Thank you.
I know you've been around traveling, doing some things, so kind of how have things been, trying to kind of traveling the state and seeing different players and stuff?
Well, this was the busiest spring summer I've ever had. I made sure that the one thing that I did is try to get to everywhere, and I did. And I went to everywhere from West Florida to FSU to Florida to USF, UCF, Miami, FAU, FIU. I went to Warner. I went to Kaiser, and I saw close to 300 different teams at 7-on-7s and almost 4,000 kids, and had an opportunity to see everybody and, talk with a lot of the coaches down at Miami twice. I got a chance. Well, in the spring, I also got a chance to watch them scrimmage. And then I went down there for a 7-on-7 and then one of their camp days, and met a lot of the kids that were coming in. Was there when Darian Coleman and the kid Michael Clayton were having that kind of like a tryout that Michael Clayton lost to Darian, since Darian committed to them. So, I've had an opportunity. And then over this last weekend, I took our last 2 weekends. Weekend before was in Tampa for their media days. Got a chance to see 75 schools. And this last week was like kind of a crash course where you had teams all the way from Polk County through Orlando, up to Ocala, and over to the Space Coast at media days in Orlando at the stadium there, Camping World Stadium. 108 schools in 3 days. So,
wow, that's a lot.
So, and then this week, obviously, we have our media days on Friday for the BCA at Dave & Buster's in Hollywood. And then Brandon O'Doy and his hotbed people are going to host one on Saturday, which we were a part of last year, and looking forward to it. So a lot of things going. Today starts the official day of football camps around Florida. So high schools are now in that mode where they're going to have a couple of weeks, 2 weeks from now, you can have a really nice kickoff classics, 8 games over at Travis Powell Stadium, highlighted by Miami Norland hosting Sefner Armwood and Miami commitment Gerard Pringle. So it's and then the season gets started.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I mean, I'm excited for the high school football season as well as the college football season, because we have an expanded college football playoff where a lot of teams who couldn't get in before, when it was just a 4-team playoff, can now get in. And one of those teams that is being talked about a lot to make the playoff is the Miami Hurricanes. And Miami had their ACC Media kickoff last week. And I do want to say that they came off pretty confident. The people that represented them were, of course, head coach Mario Cristobal, quarterback Cam Ward, linebacker Kiko Mauanoa, and offensive lineman Jalen Rivers. And they just came off really confident at this ACC kickoff. And I actually, want to play a clip of just Cam Ward at the ACC media kickoff, just kind of answering a question right there on their network. It really just kind of showed just how confident he is, and just how confident this team should be going into.
I always knew I would be in this position. I always had that confidence in myself. My mom and dad instilled that in me. But I feel like the biggest thing for me going into this year is, is getting better at the easy stuff. I feel like where I lacked last year, I always knew I would be in this position. I always had that confidence in myself. My mom and dad has instilled that in me. But I feel like the biggest thing for me going into this year is, is getting better at the easy stuff. I feel like where I lacked last year, is not taking the easy stuff all the time, trying to get too big play happy. And that's one thing that, I tried to hone in the spring. And, I feel like this is one of my best springs out of all my college career. Obviously I got Jacoby George, Strep out there, Isaiah Horton. I think Elijah Aurora is gonna have a great year for us this year. So I have some weapons around me. But we got to show up every game. We can't take games off no matter we're playing the best team in the country or one of the worst teams. We got to be the same team on that field every Saturday. As far as
So, so you kind of hear just kind of the confidence of a Cam Ward there. But Blue, just your thoughts on this team going into this season, as far as their expectations, what the national expectations are right now. Do you expect them to contend for a playoff, and or should they even be more confident to maybe contend for a national championship?
Well, obviously, there's a lot to be happy about and a lot to be optimistic about, and certainly things have changed over the last year and a half, the last 2 years with this rosters. It was told to me by Coach Cristobal when he first got there that this roster will change dramatically over the next 3-4 years and continue to change as our success, comes to us. And certainly, no, not out of the realm. I think, and I said this before, they're a top 12 team going into the season, no matter what anybody else says. Because you got to remember too, Marcus, outside of the state of Florida, California and Midwest, Northeast, Miami's a 13-13 team over the last 2 years. So a lot of people are not on board with the enthusiasm. But when you add somebody like a Cam Ward, you get one of the top running backs out of the portal in Martinez. You get one of the top running wide receivers who knows the system, like Brown at Houston. In addition to everything else that you brought in, they go into the season on the defensive side of the ball with probably potentially one of the best defensive fronts in the country. By the end of the year, they will have, if they all play up to their level, with the addition of a Barrow and guys like that, with a Bain and some of the other players. They've dramatically upped their game at the linebacker position. A lot of the maturity, Wesley Basaint and Mawanoa and some of the emerging guys that over the last couple of years. And I'm reminded back in the 80s and, early 90s that when they used to have their spring games and they used to have them at the Orange Bowl, and we would go and you'd walk behind the bench and see all the jersey names and you go, oh man, I forgot they had him. Well, Miami's at that mode now where they're starting to, put those stockpile, some of them stars, especially I think at the offensive line position where they've gone from 2-3 years ago where it was an embarrassment that the defensive lines would push that offensive line back 5 yards into running backs. Well, not so much anymore. The offense, to me, has an opportunity to be one of the highest scoring in the country. How can you not? You have a deep running game, as I said, adding with Martinez. You have an offensive line that I think, and we'll get into that, I think is a strong part of this offensive side. You have a quarterback who's been there, done that. You have receivers who have the potential. You have somebody like Restrepo with 51 catches this year becomes the all-time leading receiver at Miami, which is for a guy who everybody said at the beginning of his career, oh, he's too small, he's too short. Well, first team all ACC last year. You have Kobe George, who needs to Jacoby George, who needs to play up to his potential. And if he does, he could be really good. You have Isaiah Horton. You have a lot of these new faces. They should average 40 points a game on offense. Defensively, as I said, this is a team that has an opportunity to be really, really special. I think the fact that the front seven is much better than it has in the past, it's going to afford the secondary a lot more leeway to, get baptism under fire. Special teams as good as you're going to get, kicking wise, punting wise, the returns. Everybody is right now, I think, in I think it's going to be a great season, and I think that all expectations will be met. They have a couple of trap games, they have a couple of home games against Virginia Tech and Florida State, and obviously the 2 trap games on the road being Louisville and the last game against Syracuse, which is always going to be tough because Miami's never played well at the Carrier Dome as it was. But I'll tell you, if you take one game at a time, like Cam Ward said, I'd see nothing but success for this program.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's hard to have confidence based on the 13-13 these past few years because, you know, we've gone through this route before, right? We've gone into a season with plenty of hype. Miami is probably the most overhyped team in the country every year. I think they're kind of living off maybe their reputation or the talent that they acquire, but it never seems to come to fruition on the field. But I think this season is different, and it all starts with that guy that I just played a few minutes ago in this podcast, and Cam Ward. Right. I think he is the big difference. We all know how important quarterback is to a team, and we all know that last year's quarterback play was mediocre. Let's just call it what it is. I think if it was just maybe a step above that, I think this team wins, maybe 10 games last season. So they get a significant upgrade at quarterback. I think they get that upgrade in wins to get 10 wins, but I think this team could possibly win more. So it really kind of depends on how healthy they stay. A couple of key guys can't afford to get injured, but I think Miami's definitely on track to probably their best season since, the early 2000s.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree. They've got the potential, and obviously, excuse me, you have to play one game at a time, but I just, you see so many positives coming out, of that program. Great spring, really productive offseason, played the portal to the hilt. Excuse me, starting to use some of those kids that were freshmen last year, like Chris Johnson and Ray Joseph and Bobby Washington, and getting an opportunity to kind of take the wrapping off of those guys to now. Yeah. Where you got to figure that they're the type of team, taking one game, and it's so easy to be caught up, with excuse me, to be in a position where you go, well, this, that, and these guys. Well, you still have to have guys, excuse me, perform. And when you take it, like I said, you take a look at the newcomers like Samuel Brown having an opportunity, to do something special with Martinez and an offensive line who, excuse me, that has the opportunity, as you mentioned, with the Jalen Rivers and a Samson Okunlola, and obviously Zach Carpenter coming in to play center, replacing a guy who was probably one of Miami's best over the last decade or so, and Lee, and you got guys like Inez Cooper, excuse me, up front, and Francisco Mauano is coming back. He had a little surgery in the offseason. So I think that the big strength from them is going to be up front. And I think even with the depth, you're looking at kids like Markel Bell and Tommy Kinsler, and kids that haven't, Ryan Rodriguez, who is learned so much over the last couple of years, and then Luis Cristobal, coming in from Georgia State, and and having an opportunity maybe to add some depth to it. So I think when you take a look at that, the only question mark is how is a guy like Jacoby George, who has really been so up and down, going to play. And I think somebody like a Samuel Brown's going to light a fire under his butt, and and guys like Nye Carr and Josiah Trader are going to say, hey, listen, if you don't want the spot, we do.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're rolling into fall camp right now, Blue. Football is officially starting for us and for the players and coaches, maybe not for the fans as far as games are concerned, because we're a ways away from that on the college and high school level. But Camp is always basically stimulating what you got, like like how much depth do you have, and who are going to be fighting for jobs and that sort of thing. But when you look at these different position groups, there's a few that kind of stand out among others. So which do you think is the strongest position group on this Miami Hurricanes football team?
Well, I think the offensive and defensive lines are the strongest part of this team, which they've really stressed over the last couple of years, because you know as well as I do, games are won and lost up front. And Miami certainly, as I, just illustrated with some of the offensive linemen that they have and some of the depth. You remember when Jalen Rivers came in, a lot of people expected a lot of great things for him. Well, over the last year and a half, he's kind of lived up to that. He's the leader up front, but the leader of a lot of guys who we saw, a kid like Francisco Mauanoa last year, Francis Mauanoa, take the world by storm as playing as a true freshman on the offensive line, which is always tough to do. And having a kid like Inez Cooper come through and having, Matthew McCoy and players like that add depth. So I think the offensive line and certainly the defensive line, as I mentioned, has an opportunity. We already saw what Ruben Bain could do last year. He's just an animal. And then they add guys like C.J. Clark and Simeon Barrow, who I think is going to be, and he's already proved what he could do. And then you got Tyler Barrett. I think, and then you look. If Akeem Messidor can come back healthy, he's a beast. He's a starter at anywhere in the country. And then Ahmad Moten up front, as a wide body, as somebody's huge and certainly can play that nose tackle position. And you got Marley Cook, who's a kid who's a redshirt senior who's coming in. And then Elijah Alston, who is another one of those kids. So, you take a look up front, and then you still got, guys like that, Josh Horton, and you got Anthony Campbell. But I'll tell you what, that defensive front, it could really set the tone. And as you said before, linebacker wise with Wesley Besaint and Raul Gary Papo, who's starting to really show what he's all about. Bobby Washington, who we really haven't had a chance to see, play as well. And then Francisco Mauanoa is probably one of the best in the ACC. No doubt. He's a playmaker. And then, got guys like Jalen Alderman coming in. So, the defense and offensive fronts, especially, are going to be the places to go. And then, as you mentioned, having a quarterback like, Cam Ward, a lot of experience, 4 years. He's a guy who's a calming factor. He's a leader, and people are going to gravitate towards him. So, I don't see any reason why Miami shouldn't compete from day one against every team and win battles up front on both sides.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more about the defensive line being one of the strongest positions. I think they just have so much depth, and just the several transfers that you mentioned when you get Barrow, Barron, Cook, and Clark and Alston. Those are all just transfers. So you just add those guys to the Ruben Bains and the Akeem Messidors of the world. I think this defensive line could be the best in the country. And
I agree.
I'm not saying that as a homer or anything like that because I'm covering the Hurricanes. I really truly believe that this defensive line could be the best in the country. But let's talk about the weakest position group, though, as well. And for me, I'll just say the group that I think is the weakest is the defensive back group. And that's only because just a lack of depth. If they suffer an injury here or there, then you're likely going to play a guy who has very limited experience. Whether it be, a Markeith Williams that has to jump in, or Damari Brown, although he did get some playing time last year. He's still very, very young and raw. Jadias Richard likely going to be in the rotation, as well as Michelle Powell, who transferred from Washington, and then Jaden Harris. But after those guys, if any of those guys go down, you're probably looking at a Robert Stafford who I don't think has played a snap on
great
defense.
athlete. Great athlete,
Yeah.
just hasn't had the opportunity. And you take a look at guys like Darrell Porter Jr., who had a really good year last year. Zaquan Patterson, who I think is first out of the gate because of his experience. You got the Michael Powell kid, as you mentioned, but you also have Zaquan, who showed in the spring that he's one of the guys. You still have Markeith Williams, who's been there a couple of years, and he has an opportunity, maybe to do a few things. You have Jaden Harris, who's a guy that they like quite a bit too. So you have names there, and I think that the two guys that may push his secondary to that next level, as you mentioned, Jedias Richard, who comes in from Vanderbilt, and also Isaiah Taylor, Jason Taylor's son, who comes in from Arizona with a year under his belt, as a safety position. So the pieces are there, but that inevitable experience factor still and production still looms. But with the linebacker core, with the front seven totally, I think it affords a lot of these secondary guys to have a better opportunity, rather than if they didn't have any great play up front where they would be on an island every single play. At least now they'll have some, pressure on the quarterback or a running back that doesn't get 30 and 40 yards at a clip.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that kind of comes with fall camp is a depth chart battles, and I'll just name a few battles that kind of come to my mind, and you'll let me know, Larry, which is kind of the most intriguing to you. First, I would say that second DB spot. Well, I think we can pretty much pencil in a Darrell Porter Jr. as your lockdown corner on one side. But who are they going to play on the other side? Is it going to be Jedias Richard? Is it going to be Damari Brown? Is it going to be the transfer from Marshall, Deani Hill? There's just a lot of different options there. I think it's safety. Whether they play Michelle Powell at nickel or safety, Michelle Powell is definitely going to be in the rotation in the starting lineup. Yeah. And I do believe Jaden Harris will man one of those starting positions as well. But you like I said, you got a Damari Brown. Is Zaquan Patterson gonna really show what he can do? Is Dylan Day gonna take a step up as well? You also have Isaiah. Forget his last name, but he was injured last year. He's out of
Isaiah Taylor. No, not Isaiah Taylor.
No, not Isaiah Taylor. It's the other guy. He'll come to my mind as well. Okay. But basically, there's just a lot of positions there at the defensive back position that I think could be up for grabs. And then as far as the other positions go, I think it's just going to be a really large rotation at defensive line. So I don't think there's so much battles there. Backup quarterback, I think, is kind of interesting. I think, Reese Poffenbarger is probably the guy, but, kind of want to see how Emory Williams looks. I mean, he did have a couple of starts last season, looked pretty decent in those starts. And then you're looking at second and third running back. Is A.J. Allen really going to solidify that, or is Chris Johnson going to step up there?
Or is Jordan Lyle going to step in? And we saw him plenty in high school, and he's a big time kid, great runner. And but a lot has to do with the health of Fletcher. And if Fletcher and A.J. Allen and Lyle and Chris Johnson all remain healthy, behind Martinez, who is a breakaway back and a guy that could really elevate this team to another level. You look at a Mark Fletcher, who's just a big, powerful back, but you don't want to use him as a battering ram like last year. And that was, I thought that was not a great move. I mean, even though he's a big kid, he's not that type of runner. He's not, he's going to get you those tough yards inside, but you got to give him a little space too, and then not so much put him in on, inside the 20 situations, although it might benefit Miami to do that. I just think you wear and tear a kid like that who's, he's a downhill runner. He's more of a guy who could have been at Ohio State as as one of those big backs that are downhill runners. So it depends how they're used. But certainly I want to see A.J. Allen. He's shown flashes that he can, carry the load. And that's the thing, too. The more backs that you have, Marcus, is going to be better because you could spell a lot of those guys. Nobody wants to be out to prove a point that, that this guy's going to play this and, 10 carries. You just got to carry these guys to where they're going to help you. The worst thing is if you overuse them and get them hurt, they're going to be on the bench and then they're no use to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, those are really kind of the depth chart battles I think we will be watching during this camp. And also something to watch for is really kind of a breakout player as well. People want to see, who's going to emerge, who is really going to make a name for themselves here in the 2024 season. Who would that be for you, Blue?
That's a no-brainer. Elijah Lofton. I think this kid is a potential play on Sunday days, a potential first-round draft pick, just a monster. And I was a buddy of mine's son is offensive line and offensive line coach at Bishop Gorman High School in Las Vegas. And he told me about Elijah when he was in the 9th grade when we were talking about Brevin Jordan and how Elijah kind of pattered himself out of after Brevin Jordan. And the thing about Elijah in the state championship game last year against Liberty, he ran one, he threw one, caught one, and picked off a ball for a touchdown. And in the spring, I had the opportunity while your running backs were backed up. Oh, by the way, your 6'1.5", 230-pound H-back tight end carried the ball 9 times for 142 yards in the spring jamboree. And it's just the kid, as you could see, he looks like he belongs. And I told a lot of people, I says, watch that first Florida game because you're not going to park that Lamborghini in the garage. You're going to let it out, and he's going to come in on situational plays, and he's going to be a tough matchup. I don't care what Florida has. You're just not going to get a guy who, in the spring ran by all these greats that Miami has on the secondary because of his speed, his size, and he looks like a senior. Just the way, but he's my breakout player. I think that he's going to be a kid that has an opportunity to put his hands on the ball in a lot of different situations, and he's probably the most versatile player on that entire offense.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I think he can be a great chess piece. For the Miami Hurricanes.
Who do you like?
Well, I like a couple of players who've been around that.
But you can't use Cam Ward. You can't use Cam Ward because these are established players. And these are guys that I think were expected to come in and make a difference. That's all. When you look at a Cam Ward or guys like that, you expect them to be the leaders. You got them for that role.
Yeah, for me, it's another Elijah. It's an Elijah that I think people just forget just how talented he is because he's been riddled with injuries for the past couple of years. And then staying with the tight end position, Elijah Arroyo. I really feel like he's going to be a really big difference maker for this football team.
Yeah,
this season. Last year, the tight end position was basically invisible. I mean, we didn't see the tight ends at all. And I think part of that reason is because Tyler Van Dyke was pretty much in love with Xavier Restrepo and targeted him mostly, throughout the entire season. Jacoby George had a decent season as well, but I don't think Van Dyke really spread the ball around enough. And I think with Ward is the type of guy who improvises and he can make plays off script. Or if a big target like Arroyo who can run, gets open, I think Ward will be able to find him. And I think he is due for a huge year. I mean, he said it himself, Ward did, about Arroyo having a big year during the ACC kickoff. And I just agree. I just think that he's going to have a huge year. I think Miami fans should be happy about the tight end position this season with Elijah and Elijah. That might be the new law firm for the Miami Hurricanes with Arroyo and Lofton. I think these two guys will make a huge impact this year. I think both of those guys will truly break out to help this team get to the college football player for the first time in the school's history.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a lot to like about all those kids. And, like I said, there's a lot of players in there that need to step up. I mean, there's no question. They've got to show what everybody, and certainly Elijah, when he first came on in, and they were all loving him as a freshman, but he's not stayed healthy. And that's going to be imperative.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly hope he stays healthy for the entire season. I think it'll be the big difference for the Miami Hurricanes down the line. Larry Blustein joining me once again for a Blu Monday. It's been a long time since we had a Blu Monday, but I'm glad we're back on track here. Looking forward to seeing you for several times in the future. Always great.
Maybe we'll be happy up in the press box instead of being, having those frowns. But I think I think it's going to be a good year. And just excuse me, just to let everybody know that this evening you're going to get an opportunity to be with us on our radio show on WQAM at 650. Talking about the Hurricanes. So I hope everybody joins in. Marcus, very knowledgeable about the University of Miami and everything that's going on. He attends everything, which is so vital. It's easy to cover things from your computer, but it's better if you're there in person and get a chance to see these kids and talk to them and, see what they bring to the table more than just the football. There's a lot of very intelligent kids on this team. As you mentioned, guys like Xavier Restrepo, who's now on the university's time. He's already got his degree, and now he's going for a master's degree. And nice. I think when you do that, and the same thing with Michael Redding, getting his degree, and two of the most intelligent kids on the team. And that's what you do, Marcus. You start making the university, pay off, not just go there for 2 or 3 years and then go to somewhere else and never get that degree. But that's so important because football doesn't last forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely excited to be on with you tonight on 560 WQAM. Last Saturday I was at the annual cookout.
Nice.
Got a chance to speak to a lot of the kids that were in attendance. A lot of great kids out there, a lot of talented players. So looking forward to that for sure.
So it's great when they have those events. I know that Florida had those Friday Night Lights things where you come and you do your 1 millionth running and all that I think they're so obsolete now because the month of July for the first 3 weeks, the NCAA closes down all its member schools, so the coaches could take a vacation and, they can remove themselves. So the last thing after May and June of going to camps and running 40s and, doing cone drills and doing verts and, having one-on-ones, it's time to wind down. And I think a lot of these schools are smart to have events where it brings in some of their top flight recruits, like Miami did with the barbecue the last couple of years. And even back to when Mark Richt was there and he dove off the high board, so I think those things are great. I think you find out a lot because you can mingle more with a lot of these recruits, these high-profile kids that may not, may have Miami in their top 2-3, but maybe you can win them over, by a position coach coming over or Mario Cristobal or any of his coaches and spending more time with the kids and their families to see what they're what they're like off the field. And that's important too, because you got to build relationships with these coaches because, you want to go in and see your position coach during the day. If you have, a question or you have a problem or things, are tough at school and, a lot of these kids. And I often say the best thing that they ever invented was the early enrollment where you can go in January, because by the time May and June rolls around, you're already almost a sophomore. You're acclimated in every way, from your studies to your living to making your decisions, because mom and dad aren't there to tell you to do this or that, or, do your wash and things like that. So it's an important factor. A lot of people don't understand. It's the biggest part of their existence is to acclimate themselves to the college life, to study habits, to things what you're going to do off your time, because as well as I do, when you have football, that's all planned out for you. You don't have a decision to make. They give that. So it's the off times. It's, how can I have a nice time without, getting in trouble? And that's tough, because it shows you the influences that you have to have, and, how important making friends are, because the friends that you make today will be your friends for life.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a chance to see a lot of the kids bond with each other and just have a good time. They are actually playing the college football video game out there, as well as just kind of mingling with everybody. Plenty on CanesCounty.com to unpack as far as interviews that I've had with plenty of kids. So definitely visit the website and subscribe to see all of those exclusive interviews on CanesCounty.com. That's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Marcus Benjamin, once again, publisher for CanesCounty.com, and Larry Blustein. You can find his stuff on LarryBlustein.com. Also visit Prep Red Zone, Florida, as well, for a lot of more great stuff from Blu. Also subscribe to this YouTube channel, live from Canes County. Until the next episode.